Hello, welcome to today's video. Today we're talking about integrity and authenticity. What are the differences between integrity and authenticity? Are they the same thing? Are they different? What are the nuances between the two of them? I went this weekend for a walk with my selfie stick and my cameras and was asking folks who were out and about enjoying the evening what they felt the difference was, which one they thought was more difficult, and how they interacted and interrelated with each other. Today, we're going to talk about these two and consider how we answer these questions. Integrity and authenticity, are they the same? Are they different? How well do they play together? Let's dive right in. Authenticity it's the attribute of being true to oneself without pretense or deception. It's being honest in one's feelings and the way they're behaving and the feeling. It requires a lot of self-awareness. It requires self-acceptance, and there's a huge element of courageousness that is involved in one expressing authenticity. Now, even as I was describing authenticity, I'm not sure if you, like me, were thinking, this sounds a lot like integrity already. Like the fact that integrity also requires that we be self-aware of ourselves, that we have a degree of acceptance of ourselves, the courageousness that's involved. I mean, this sounds like it has a lot of the components of integrity. So does that mean that they're the same thing? Or are they different? Well, let's talk a little bit about integrity. Integrity is everything that we've said so far about authenticity, except it has a little bit more. Integrity also incorporates not only self-awareness, and not only incorporates that degree of self-acceptance and the courageousness that's involved, the familiarity with knowing oneself really well and knowing why one is the way they are. Integrity also goes a little further by way of including a moral framework. It bakes in a way of saying, here is how I'm choosing to act this way over this way because I feel that is right, or I'm not choosing to act this way because I feel that's wrong or out of bounds. So integrity is authenticity with a moral framework, whereby one would adhere to a set of principles according to their value system, their beliefs, and one who is committed to walking with integrity or to pursuing integrity also will pursue it even when it is difficult, even when it comes at great personal cost, even when it's unpopular, they still will commit themselves to walking this pathway of integrity in a way that doesn't benefit them perceivably. It requires a high level of personal development, responsibility. It requires accountability and ethical behavior. So this is the contrast that I see when I think of authenticity and integrity. They both sound so similar. They seem to mimic each other. They're not very far from each other, but I would say integrity goes a little bit further than where authenticity will take one. Authenticity is fantastic because it does require a level of courageousness to express oneself as they truly are. It takes a significant amount of self-awareness, and it also definitely does incorporate that element of self-acceptance, saying, here's who I am, and being unapologetic about it. Integrity goes a little bit further in saying, here is who I am and how I am, but in a framework where I'm committing myself, I'm binding myself to a moral framework that I feel makes sense to me, and I'm going to follow through on, even if it's at my expense. It's possible for a person who is authentic to not pursue conclusions or commitments when they seem to be disadvantageous to themselves. But it's impossible for a person who's committed to integrity to jump off the path, especially when things seem to be challenging. Now, authenticity is extremely important for one to have in this world today. In fact, it was an interesting experience as I was having conversations with many who I was meeting on the street. They they highly valued authenticity over integrity. There were so many who were saying authenticity is far more important than integrity because it's important for one to be true to themselves. So that was that individualistic expression that one is to show forth. And yet I asked another question, and that question was, is it easy for folks by and large to be authentic? And the resounding response was no, it's not easy. For the ones that I were asking, they were saying they didn't have trouble being authentic, but the perception out there is that it's far more difficult, and I think I would agree with this, for most people to be authentic, to feel like they could authentically express themselves. And there's a whole variety of reasons for why a person would feel that it's really challenging to be authentic. And some of those might include that they're afraid of what others might think of them. They might be concerned about the repercussions if they're truly to express their perspectives and their convictions. So there's a whole variety of reasons for why most would struggle with being authentic, and so they repress who they are. They repress their themness, if that makes sense. They repress their uniqueness and what makes them. And as they do that, they try to fit in. They try to mold themselves to what they're seeing around them so that they can survive perceptually. They feel like if I can just, put myself down like this, then and repress who I truly am, then I wouldn't have to suffer the consequences that I fear if I were to express myself. Now, authenticity is important, absolutely. But I would say between authenticity and integrity, the one is more challenging than the other. And I was just talking about how challenging it is already for so many to express their authenticity. It's a challenge, and that's why I said earlier in my reflections on authenticity that it's a courageous commitment that one has if they're authentically living who they are. It's their way of saying, I am, like I said, unapologetic about who I am in the way that I express myself to those around me in community. That takes a tremendous amount of courage and self-confidence to be able to bolster oneself and say, I am here on purpose, and here's what you get when you get me. That's challenging, but even more challenging is the commitment to walking with integrity in one's life. Integrity is by far, I believe, way more challenging because at the very heart of it, it incorporates deep levels of personal self-growth. It is one of those things where integrity, goodness, if you were to make this commitment to walk down this path, you may already be a person who's committed to living authentically, but now you're going to have to start challenging the parts about yourself that you're saying, I should be this way, I shouldn't be this way, and you start trying to conform to your moral framework that makes sense to you, especially as you live in community. One of those things I've been saying for some time now is integrity is meaningless if one is the only person in the world. If you're the only person left in the world, then integrity is meaningless because you could just do whatever you want. You could live authentically and not worry about what anyone's thinking because there is no one around you who's going to give their judgment or thoughts. You could wake up whenever, you could say whatever, you could eat, you could do whatever you want. But integrity only makes sense when we remember that we are living in community, that we, by nature of our existence, are not alone. We required others to be involved for our existence to come into play. We did not just come out of nothing. We came because there were other factors at play that came into connection that enabled our existence to now be here. And even after we were born, we still relied and were dependent for a significant part of our lives to learn and to grow and to evolve over time to be able to be who we are today. It is impossible for anyone in this world to say that they are self-made. The reality is that we are all in community. And as a result of all of us being in community, we've had to at some point learn how do we interrelate with others in our community? How do we practice those elements of healthy dependence? How do we also express our independence? How do we bring these two together to look at what interdependence looks like in our existence? And that is the arena that integrity plays. Integrity is far more challenging because As we consider who we are and how we can be authentic to ourselves, how can we, in the midst of our authenticity and our authentic expressions, also learn how to interact in a way that plays well with those around us in community? That's a critical part of what it means to be in community. Our existence is on the very premise that we need to figure out how to live this life on this planet with the resources that we have access to in a way that not only we, but others around us can also make it to the trajectory that we're all going in our progression of life in general. And so integrity, far more challenging, I believe, than authenticity. Authenticity is challenging in its own right, to be certain, and kudos for those of us who've been able to come to a place where we can say, here's who I am and here's how I'm progressing through life. Wonderful. Integrity takes us a little further, and it requires a deep understanding of what your personal values and beliefs are. That takes not only, authenticity says, I know myself well enough to know that I like this, but not this, and I want to do this and not this, and that's a wonderful version of self-awareness. But integrity takes it a little further to say, but why? Why do I value this? Is this a good thing that I like this? Is it an appropriate thing that, yeah, I can be authentic when I express anger when someone disagrees with me, but is that a good thing or not? See how integrity takes it a little further? An authentic person would say something like, oh, if you disagree with me, I'm just going to yell at you point blank. What do you think? Or what are you talking about? That could be an expression of someone who's saying, I'm being authentic. I get angry when someone disagrees with me, which I don't. Just an example. Integrity would take one further and saying, is this a really helpful response? Because if I don't think it is, and if I value respectful engagement communication-wise, I'm going to have to address this authentic part about me and say, this has got to change. And so now there's deep personal work in understanding, why do I get ticked off when someone disagrees with me? And how can I go about now trying to shift and change the way I respond so that I can have something that resembles a lot more of what my value system is? Integrity, far more challenging, because there's also a willingness to act on those personal values and beliefs that one subscribes to, especially when it's inconvenient. And let me tell you, personal growth, it's always inconvenient. It's a hard workout. It's like a workout for your soul. It's a workout for your identity, to be able to say, how can I rework this into something that resembles what I truly and deeply value? It's not easy, it's inconvenient, it's uncomfortable. It requires a strong sense of commitment to self-discipline and self-control, and that willingness to also take responsibility for one's actions. So that when you're thinking, for example, with our earlier example, if you just blast out at people who disagree with you and that's just the way you are, and you're saying, I got to change this. Now you're starting to take responsibility for when you do blast out saying, I was wrong on that one. I'm really sorry. Would you please forgive me? I'm trying to work on this and I want to engage in a different way than I currently am. What does that look like for one to experience that transformation, that evolution of themselves as they commit themselves to integrity? Authenticity, show up as you are, by all means. Integrity requires evolution. And that is difficult. Change is always difficult, isn't it? Now, is it possible to have authenticity without integrity? Is it possible for one to be authentic without having integrity? Yes, I totally believe so. It's possible for one to be honest about who they are, flaws and all, without any commitment to a moral follow through on how they ought to act. Like our earlier example, if someone just blasts out whenever they get someone disagrees with their perspective, it is possible for that person to say, here's who I am. I'm giving the honest reflection of who I am unapologetically, and that's what you get. So it's possible for someone to have authenticity without integrity. Now, does this go the other way though? Is it possible for a person who is committed to integrity to live without authenticity? Another way of saying it is it possible to have integrity without authenticity? I believe this is impossible. I believe it's impossible for a person to have integrity without authenticity because one comes before the other. Authenticity is knowing oneself well enough. Integrity is following through on how to commit to a moral framework on the premise that you know yourself well enough. So a person who's committed to integrity already is pursuing authenticity as they get to know themselves. They're only doing it in the context of how does this work in community and how can I make this work well, not only for myself, but for those around me as well. It is impossible for a person to pursue integrity without authenticity. Authenticity requires really a deep understanding of oneself and a willingness to be true to it, but integrity takes you even further in saying, how can I not only understand myself well enough and be true to myself, but how can I do that within a moral framework that I want to bind myself to because I value that higher than my personal autonomy and independence. Now, both authenticity and integrity are difficult for so many, and yet these two are super critical. One, because it's a way of presenting honesty. Both of these have honesty baked right in them. Authenticity requires a significant amount of honesty to be able to say, here's who I am. And that's a really important component, especially in the way we communicate about ourselves to those around us. Authenticity requires honesty, as does integrity. Integrity just says, I want to be honest about where I am, even as I try to commit myself to a moral framework that I find works for me. So these two are both significantly critical for us to not only have, but also to express and put on display. It's true that many struggle with just even being authentic. They like the sound of what it feels like to be authentic, but what is it? How do I actually walk into it? It starts off with being honest, one with yourself. Honesty with self to say, who am I and how am I currently perceiving myself and how am I committed to living this life that I have been granted? How do I exist with honesty about who I am and that self-understanding? Many struggle with their identity, and they even struggle further with their sense of purpose. They struggle with a sense of feeling disconnected, and I would argue a lot of this is because they first and foremost don't know who they are themselves. Authenticity, I believe, helps to reconnect one with themselves, to say, who am I and how am I? And that's a really helpful starting point. Integrity, however, helps to build trust and reliability and credibility with oneself first and foremost, as you get to know yourself authentically and saying, okay, here's who I am, but here's who I also want to be. I acknowledge that I'm an individual who is in the process of change over time, but the real question is, what kind of change is that? Is that a good change, or is that the kind of change that you look on and say, I'm not really proud of the person who I am today? And I remember what that looked like for myself when I had that significant moment looking in the mirror and saying, I've gone so far from the person I wanted to be. It's going to take some significant, drastic steps for me to realign with who I am. The cost is going to be supremely great. I'm most likely going to lose everything. Do I really want to walk through this pathway, or can I just continue living with a lack of authenticity and integrity in my life and keep everything that I still value? And in my experience, I chose that reset button where I said, I'm willing to lose everything if I can reconnect with myself. And I'm so glad I did. It's one of those most painful decisions ever, and yet I made it. And looking back, I have no regrets, even though I regret all the hurt that I caused and the loss that I suffered. Knowing who I am today and living on purpose the way I am is super, super, it's like, it enriches my life far more than I ever experienced before. So integrity helps to build one's sense of awareness of who they are, yes, but also that level of trust. When they look at themselves in the mirror, they know they're being honest with themselves. They know that they're making decisions that are true to themselves and to their value system. And then as they learn to live and express that in the community that they're in, trust builds in their community. They are seen as reliable and trustworthy, and that people want to spend more time with them, and there's wonderful opportunities that come along for more connectedness. Remember, we were just saying that so many struggle with feelings of disconnectedness and lack of purpose and sense of identity. Let me tell you, one of the primary purposes I think all of us can take on as one of our core pursuits is, how can we grow personally? How can we continue to evolve and grow? Because all of us are change. We're change and like we're continuing to shift and change. I remember this one guy that I was chatting with on the weekend while I was asking my questions. He was so rigid in his stance of what's right and wrong. And I remember what that was like when I was once there. I was like, this is so true, but not only true for me, but true for everyone. And I'm going to make that decision for everyone. And I try to like force that on other people, and it just doesn't work that way. Each and every one of us is so unique and different in the backgrounds and perspectives we come from. What does it look like for us to acknowledge the diversities that we have amongst us, in the ways that we even got there and how we evolved over time, and the differences and our equality that we don't have a quorum on comprehensive knowledge of what truth is, and we're all trying to fumble our way to figure out how this works. How can we not but grow to that stage where we are giving each other permission to say, I want you to be who you are, even as you try to figure that out. I'm going to make space for that. Whether I'm in your space or not, I want to make sure that I'm honoring and respecting your right to have access to that change, because we're all a change in progress. Who I am like a decade ago is not who I am today. I am far different. And so even as we do that, this is something I think we can all say hell yes to, that our primary purpose, if you're looking for a purpose in life, work on yourself. Don't work on those around you. Work on yourself. I'm working on myself. I'm working on myself by way of saying, how do I figure out my own stuff? How do I progress in my meanness? That's a lot of work for me already. Even in relation to my kids, I want to guide them, but I also want them to grow, to be able to make their own decisions, so that they're the ones responsible for their evolution as well too. My friends the same way, like even you guys, I'm encouraging you. Who are you? How can I make space for you as I get to know you? We're far more likely to succeed in life because we are committed not only to authenticity, which is a beginning helpful point, but it is far more enhanced when we commit to a life living and pursuing integrity. And what does that look like for you, my dear listener? If you've received some benefit from this conversation, if you are intrigued by the various nuances that living a life of integrity entails, and how you can experience the benefits and perks of living with integrity, I would love for you to subscribe to this channel. I'd love for you to walk alongside and engage with me and grow with me, because that's what I'm pursuing, is growth in this vein of integrity. I want to inspire integrity. I want to set a passion for what could be as you experience liberation in living a life unfettered, unbounded, because you know who you are, and you know how you are, why you are, and the way you engage with the world the way you are. This is some of the beautiful things I've come to experience as a result of committing to integrity. I would love for you to experience the same thing. So subscribe if you've not already done so. I would love for your partnership and for us to grow together as we band together with others who are like-minded to say, this world could use a lot more integrity. One of the questions I was asking is, do people think that there is more integrity or authenticity in the world? And they're saying that there isn't very much of either. Would you be part of infusing more integrity in this world with me? It starts off with authenticity. Let's follow through on integrity as well. I would love to make that as a safe space where you can get to know who you are in a way that is not scary, in a way that isn't intimidating and daunting, in a way that enables you to walk courageously forward. I would love for your partnership that way. Thank you so much for watching the video till the end. If you are interested in more of the same content, I've got more videos I'd love for you to peruse at your leisure. I'll just drop one over on this side over here, I think, in relation to a similar theme that I've talked on recently about integrity. But until our next video, I will wish you a fantastic day living on purpose, pursuing your integrity, getting to know yourself, to love yourself unapologetically. Talk to you soon.